You ever have a game you really like to play just die on you? Not even get stale with his formula over time or something. I mean, development stops, game's deleted. It's happened a few times to me. Paragon and Rum Royale being very enjoyable games, but victims of this happening. Although I heard Rum Royale is being brought back, which is nice. But there is a game that, while I was unable to play it at the time, I followed pretty closely and actually felt it when I heard that the plug was being pulled on development. And that's Gigantic. A third-person hero shooter action MOBA, honestly I'm getting different answers here, that had a super clean art style, a unique roster of characters, and pretty damn innovative game mechanics, especially during its time, but eventually fell to the same fate as these other games not even a year into its release. So, let's talk about it. Originally, Motika Studios began development on a game called Raid back in 2012. It was basically a prototype of what is now known as Gigantic. You can actually see some of the characters in the prototype and what their design turned into on its release. After being in closed beta starting in August 2015, Gigantic was finally released 2 years later on July 20th, 2017 on Steam, Xbox, Arc, and the Windows 10 store. Now you gotta understand that 2017 was a time where hero shooters and brawlers were abundant and booming. Overwatch, Paladins, Battleborn, and even Battle Right back before it jumped ship to the Battle Royale trend and sank itself. And sure, Gigantic wasn't that similar to the big dog that was 2017 Overwatch, but at the end of the day, competition was pretty cutthroat at the time. Despite that, Gigantic had a lot of eyes on it on release. At first glance, its art style is really colorful and inviting, and it translates well into the characters. Like, this is for sure one of the coolest rosters I've seen design-wise. There's magicians, stand users, tentacle ladies, thugs, yetis, gremlins, and teenage mutant ninja frogs, just to name a few. The characters look extremely unique from each other, which is a great sign for a game that would want to stand out and make them memorable. The art style also translates extremely well into movement and attacks. Most character kits were simple but interesting with 3 abilities and an ult, and allows those 3 abilities and your basic attack to be built upon with the in-game upgrade system, allowing for different effects and different playstyles. And the animations. God damn. It looked insanely fluid and perfectly conveyed how these heroes should feel while playing them. Tripp's movement and attacks are super quick and smooth, which fits an elusive assassin. The Margrave is a super heavy looking dude, so of course, he looks like he's smacking fools with 10,000 pounds of pure iron. My boy Wu is a good mix between fast and heavy hitting, a nice combo for a brawler type hero and a frog. Oh no! Hey, look, I gotta give credit. The animation devs on Motika did an amazing job in that department. They really hit the mark when it came to making characters feel fun and lively. Again, a good move for an up-and-coming game of its time. When it comes to the core gameplay loop, it's actually pretty creative. Alright, so each team has their main big boy, the Guardian, and to win, you need to simply kick the other Guardian's ass. So you gain power by killing creatures, enemies, and capturing power from the territories your Guardian marks. But you can also place creatures on those points that can provide support like heals while also defending and capturing power for you. So when your team reaches full power, your Guardian will then move to slam down the enemy Guardian, and you have 20 seconds to wound the Guardian and make them lose 1 of 3 hearts. If the other team reaches full power, then you are the one defending, and whatever power you had will turn into a shield, so it's still valuable to get as much power as you can even if you're losing. Eventually the Guardians will get pissed and move closer to each other, shrinking the battlefield. So the core gameplay is pretty damn solid. It's really just a bloodbath and a race to get power faster than your enemies. That's my kinda game! On paper, Gigantic looks like a very enjoyable game. Worst I can say gameplay wise is sometimes the game looks like a glorified pillow fight. A very colorful pillow fight. The time to kill was a little too high. Would have needed some tweaking if the game was still around. But in reality, Gigantic, or rather Motika Studios as a whole, was in an uphill battle even before its release. In early 2015, Motiga signed a publishing deal with Microsoft to bring Gigantic onto Windows 10 and Xbox One exclusively. Public reception was understandably negative. I mean, sure, it would mean that Motiga could gain more funding to develop their game, but at the same time, Windows 10 just came out at that point. What are we on now? 11? Many PC users did not want to move to 10. And Xbox already had Smite as the main console MOBA. So not only did people not want to upgrade even if they wanted to play the game, but people on PlayStation also couldn't play, like myself. And I get it, Microsoft and Sony love having exclusive games as an incentive to buy that console or a PC. But for an indie MOBA, you'd probably want to reach as wide of an audience as possible, am I right? And if no one likes or wants to use the Microsoft Store in 2022, I don't even want to know how much of a mess it was back in 2014. What's worse is that even after the partnership, Motiga's resources were spread way too thin. They now had to worry about scrapping the front-end UI they had in place that allowed users to use features like the chat system, similar to games like Paladins. And well, Xbox One just didn't allow that shit. So they had to build a more console-friendly version, basically wasting months and months of development. I found a pretty funny but sad quote from a senior concept artist that sums up this whole mess. It's basically like Microsoft promised an absolute dream apartment with funding for it, but when you get there, they're still building that apartment and they want you to live in it. According to Motiga's CEO, Chris Chung, the plan at first was to release the beta in early 2015, but at that point, the devs were working on a thread. Gigantic was delayed until 2016, and the current state of development funds, Chung had to make a very difficult and unavoidable decision. In early February 2016, Motiga's funds went drier than the Atacama Desert. I did my research. On the 9th, Chung had to lay off everyone in the company. When they got the news, instead of throwing in the towel right there, they just got back to work. And the day after, everyone showed up to the studio and just kept working as if nothing happened. The devs were still dedicated to working on the game they care about, even if they weren't sure where all this effort would have them turn up a week later. Because of this, Chung could find a new funding partner so they can get back on track. And after a month of headaches and uncertainty, they did. They were picked up by Perfect World Entertainment, and they even sent money up front so Motiga could pay their employees before a deal was even in place. Absolute power move on their part. At that point, Motiga was brought from the depths of development hell, and Gigantic was now able to be released on Arc, Perfect World Store, and more importantly, Steam. So now Microsoft no longer held Motiga by the balls with exclusivity, and Gigantic had a good reliable platform for their PC players. The thing is, while it was great that Motiga had good funding for their game, when it came to marketing and, you know, making sure the game doesn't faceplant after day one, general publisher business, Perfect World was kinda just like, that's cool.
Do it yourself.
Perfect World had many meetings with Motiga discussing many ambitious additions that never ended up happening, which understandably led Motiga to have doubts about if their new publisher truly cared about getting the name out there. Because, well, if they didn't, your game will definitely run into some long-term problems. July 20th, 2017. After its many closed and open beta tests from 2016, Gigantic was finally released to the public. In its first month, Gigantic actually hit good numbers given its situation. If we take a look at Steam stats, a 1.8k average with a peak of over 8k as well. Not as crazy as the other games it was lumped in with, not you though, but it was still pretty good. It ended up peaking at 15 to 20k players on all platforms playing at the same time in, I'm assuming, its first month. Again, pretty damn good. But why am I making the assumption that this peak could have only happened in its first month? Well, ooh, I mean that's not horrible, you can still bounce back. Ooh, ah, oh god damn it! So, what happened? I guess between the lack of marketing and competition with Overwatch and Paladins, even if it was forced, there was still a lot for Motiga to handle. Now, I get it. It is pretty unfair to compare an action MOBA to a hero shooter. But in a time where any game with unique characters that have abilities was labeled as an Overwatch clone, there was no chance Gigantic was gonna avoid that. When it comes to marketing, I don't think I remember seeing any ads on this game. At most, I would see big YouTubers play this game while getting sponsored, and look, this really annoys me. Paying big names to sponsor your game is whatever. It will definitely get eyes on your game in the short term at least.
He literally just sits on his head! Go on a diet, you stupid animal!
But if there isn't enough content to back up the hype, all these new players will get bored fast, and it will not only hurt your numbers, but your company's wallet. I saw a more recent game, Rogue Company, do the same thing back in 2020. They had the Beast himself play,
Where are you guys at?
a Dr. Disrespect skin and map, and they even had a promotional video of the 100 Thieves with, of course, more skins. Even with all the publicity, it didn't change the fact that in true high-res fashion, Roko was unpolished as hell. They even got Ninja to play it, and he genuinely enjoyed it and came back to Roko a few times. Say what you will about Ninja,
Fuck you say to me!
Fine gentlemen.
but that was easily their biggest chance to get the name out there, and they screwed it up. Tangent over. Sponsors can definitely work if you have the funds, but besides a new hero every few months and a few skins, there wasn't really much reason for people to come back after the first month. Anyways, funny thing I realized. Gigantic is a very generic word. So generic that the only reason it even shows when I search for it is because Google already knows I look for this game. If I go incognito and search, where is it? Oh, there it is. Buried. Gigantic isn't being searched up as much these days, that's for sure, but if it was a problem even 5 years ago during its lifetime, then
That's no good.
easy fix though. Just add a subtitle. You know, like Paladins, Champions of the Realm. How about Gigantic? Hella flippin' big.
Oh my god!
But real talk, Gigantic's name is a big part of his identity, so if I have to be extra specific with Gigantic Game or something to find it, then that will only bring issues. After July, Motiga released a few monthly updates with new heroes most notably, and they kept up with these updates till November, where Perfect World stepped in and laid off most of the crew. Unsurprisingly, the reasoning is that Gigantic wasn't profitable enough to continue funding, so instead the game was put on life support with a maintenance crew. To make things worse, it was revealed that Perfect World secretly acquired Motiga, framed it as a partnership, and had Motiga announce it as such without disclosing the reason to the CEO. Perfect World had Motiga by a tight leash since the beginning. And unfortunately, Motiga wasn't the only company unlucky enough to experience this, as the devs behind Torchlight, Runic Studios, was completely shut down. At this point, Motiga was yet again held by a thread, and this time, there was no way out. January 2018 marked the last update for Gigantic, where it was announced that servers would stay up until July. What ended up happening to Gigantic was nothing short of tragic. Motiga worked hard and fought through many tough situations, but in the end there were always financial issues which hindered development and getting the game out there. Not to mention it was thrown into, I guess, the prime of hero shooters, and Gigantic had to prove it was unique enough to be worth keeping around. But for real, it's a damn shame to see a game that obviously had a ton of work and passion behind it go down the drain. Thankfully, I'm not the only one who thinks this though, as shortly after Gigantic's shutdown, some members of the community started up Project Stamina, which is supposed to be a spiritual successor to Gigantic. Progress for the project was pretty steady. We got to see concept art for 6 of the characters who all look pretty damn nice. However, in mid-2021, there was some internal conflict with the dev team that ended up with many important members leaving. It was between the main producer, Mr. Fancy Pants, and the 4 main project leads. So basically, Mr. Fancy Pants wasn't really communicating with the team and kept making fake promises about the project, and the leads were obviously pretty fed up. So when the devs eventually asked Fancy Pants to step down, he wanted a large sum of money for the IP. So devs didn't pay, Fancy Pants didn't step down, and it led to a bunch of stress and legal shit that I recommend you read this post to get the full story on. So radio silence for 6 months until there was an update from Jake the Late announcing that Fancy Pants transferred the project to the remaining team and plans to set the project back on track. And most recently in August, there was an update saying we'll have to wait a little longer. So take that with a grain of salt and we'll see what comes of it. At the end of the day, Gigantic had a very eventful life cycle, and even if the game didn't manage to stick around after its release, it obviously left a good impression that gained a pretty loyal following in its short lifetime. I'm almost 100% sure that under better circumstances and an earlier release, this game would still be kicking today. So rest in peace, Gigantic. You truly didn't deserve your fate. And hopefully, Project Stamina pulls through and does Gigantic some justice. I'm really not short of optimism these days. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like, sub, hit that bell, all that, and I'll catch you later.